Oh, say, can you hear?
Yet another red light.
Well, I'm gonna spill all
the secrets you're holding
about the spaceships up there and the aliens down here and all history,
which is totally fake.
How did the public report their UFO experiences to you?
Well, at the time, UFO had a hotline number set up, like with an answering machine, and people could call in and leave us messages. At one time, we got a message, and it was from somebody in Louisiana, somewhere near Lake Charles, and he said that he had dead aliens buried in his backyard, and he wanted to know if we were interested. And that was kind of all he said. He might have said one or two other things, I don't remember. But it did sound serious. It didn't sound like a joke. And actually, he said, well, you know, you weren't the first number I called. I actually called the Air Force. And the Air Force said, we're not interested in UFOs or aliens, call NASA. And he called NASA, and NASA gave him the number to UFO. And so we got this call on the UFO hotline. And so anyway, we decided to call the guy back and got some more information. And it turns out that there was a funeral like a week or so before, and they have a large piece of property in Louisiana near Lake Charles, and they have their own little family plot cemetery on their property. And some of the family had come in. His grandmother was there, and it's the first time she'd been there at the house in, say, 20 or 30 years. And over at the corner of this little private cemetery, there was a big bare spot, maybe 40, 50 feet across, and he noticed his grandmother was staring at this bare patch and said, well, Grandma, what is it? And she said, well, you know, I hadn't really thought about it in years, but, you know, that's where your granddaddy buried that spaceship and those aliens. And he said, what? And so she started telling the story, and evidently back in 1937, the grandfather had come into the farmhouse that night and said that some Martians had crashed out behind the barn up on the hill, and they looked like humans, except they were kind of small, and so he gave him a Christian burial and dug a hole, and he buried their spaceship. The spaceship was only about 5 feet in diameter and maybe 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet tall in the center, and it looked like evidently like a little UFO, except that word hadn't even been coined at that time. And he said that there were 5 little creatures. They were all dead, and let's see, 3 of them were inside, and 2 of them were right outside the side of the craft where it had like cracked open or broken. And so he dug a hole. It wasn't that big, and he buried them. And ever since then, no grass has grown over the spot where he buried all that and a perimeter around them. So this actually piqued our interest, and we decided to meet this person and get some more information face to face. And so we sent a group of people over there with some testing equipment and spoke to the family in person. We checked the ground with a Geiger counter, and it was showing above background radiation, surprisingly. And also it was giving off some sort of intermittent EMF signal. And so that was interesting nonetheless, plus the story behind it. So we decided to sit down and do some checking on what we could do with this information. And one of the things we did was we found out what type of permits you might have to, let's say, relocate a Civil War vintage dead body from Louisiana to Texas. Then we also checked in what it might cost, or how you might rent radiation containment suits. And we found out real quickly that that would set off all kinds of bells and alarms, and all kinds of questions would be asked. And so we wanted to be real careful. And then also we found out that realized that we were going to need a closed back truck where we could install lead panels. And I mean, we didn't want to go up there and just one or two people and just start dig open a grave, because you don't know what you're going to run into. If it was truly aliens or something, you don't know what happens to those bodies after they decompose or whatever. Evidently it didn't affect his grandfather, because he still lived after that. But you never know what happens after if those are really alien bodies, what happens after they die. So that's when we decided we have to check on containment suits and then radiation and all this and that to really get things out of the ground safely. Plus, there's evidently a 5-foot diameter metal craft that's sitting there, buried. After we realized how much this was going to cost, we realized this was going to be far more expensive than what we could do here locally, just to deal with the situation and getting something out of the ground safely. So we decided we needed to get help from a higher source, and so we decided we better get some people together and discuss what our options might be. And so basically what ended up happening was myself and two past UFO organization presidents and a retired member of the CIA had a clandestine meeting at a Denny's restaurant near Intercontinental Airport at midnight one night. And as we went in the Denny's, we all, and I believe back then we actually carried beepers, we turned beepers off and turned cell phones off, and we sat and had the meeting and started discussing this information and what we should do about. And so we had the meeting, decided, well, we need to hand this up to a higher source or somebody in the government or somewhere to get this investigated. And at that point, it was said, well, yeah, there are things we can do. We can get like infrared photography of that entire county to see if there's any other spots or anything like that, and to verify that that is there, and other things that could be done in 5 or 10 days. And that was the last we ever heard. It vanished. It was as if conversations never occurred. So we decided this best be left buried where it is. At least we know, and we can come back at this at a later date when maybe politics change or secrecy changes. And I remember saying, you know, this kind of seems like something you'd see in a movie or on TV. Here we are, 3 UFO organization presidents and a member of the CIA having a secret meeting at midnight about a possible dead alien body in spacecraft. And it wasn't TV, it was actually happening, and that was the result of a phone call we got from our hotline. But nonetheless, this sounded like a real event, and this is something that we're going to try to keep tabs on it.
Say, can you finally
Start telling us the truth.
Protect our civil liberties and
all wars tonight?